second here. So just to a little bit more, continue on here, sorry. Please chat in your questions today. We have about 50 people on now. We're expecting over 100. So we will take breaks through the program to answer your questions. Also, I hope you'll all stay to the end for our Chipotle raffle. And then also I'm going to send a follow-up email with any of the handouts that are referenced today during the presentation. So if you're not familiar with Tiger, we are a Connecticut family business. Joe is my brother. We offer commercial and residential inspections statewide in Connecticut and also all the bordering areas, Westchester, New York, bordering towns of Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Included free is your wood destroying insect inspection. We'll talk a little bit more about that and other features of home inspection companies later in the program. We also offer radon testing, well water, and mold assessments. I think one of the things that makes Tiger unique out there in the industry is our specialties. So we have different inspectors, 203K HUD consultants on our staff if you get involved in renovation loans. We have antique home specialists, different types of new construction, equestrian properties, and so on. So just let us know what you're looking for, and we can recommend the right team member for the job. And I think, Joe, you can take it away.
Of course, now my slide's not advancing.
Do the arrows work? Oh, there you go.
There you go. So thank you, Kara, and thank you all for attending. Sorry about the quick IT glitch there. Always an adventure with Zoom and shares. And of course, I just got a new computer. We'll touch briefly on in this agenda on COVID inspection procedures. We've all been at this pandemic thing for a long time. So just a few reminders. Then get into what is a home inspection. For those of you that have been in the business for a little bit, you've probably seen a home inspection, but it is important to know some of the roots of where it comes from, why you should see consistency in the industry and such. And those are from the Connecticut Standards of Practice, what's included in inspection, and then to the meat of some of the things that you can take to your daily practice, preparing for a home inspection, helping your clients, both buyer side clients and listing clients to prepare for inspection day. We'll talk about all of us working as a team to make this a smoother process throughout that inspection day and time frame. And then selecting a home inspection company. What should your clients know? What should you know for referrals and some of the differences of what's going on out there in the market? This is the first part of our 3-part series. So each Wednesday for the next 3 weeks, and I'll touch on the bits of the radon and the water testing courses as well. Essentially, with our COVID or pandemic practices, we are trying to make everyone comfortable on site. And at this point, one of the more important things with that is still the sellers. We want them to be comfortable with people coming on their properties. We want our buyer clients to be comfortable, as well as representing realtors, and keep everyone safe that's on site. Limited attendees are preferred. In other words, of course, we want our clients to be there, but sometimes the extended families, friends, etc., doesn't bother our staff, but sellers can get concerned with some of that. We are still stocking all of our staff, with the necessary personal protection equipment, masks. We always wear booties in people's homes, so we're not tracking mud or change our shoes when we go inside. We have rubber gloves for those that request. Probably the last bullet is the most important with the way things have developed. Informing us of the needs is key. If you let us know that you have a hyper concerned seller, we can come prepared with whatever their requests are, limit the number of staff that come, and things like that. So why does your client need a home inspection? The top left bullet is probably the most important. This service really started to help people understand what they're buying and make an informed decision. It wasn't until things evolved, since I've been doing this into a little bit more of a buyer's market that a lot of the renegotiations started. Before that, it was really, let me understand what I'm buying. And that's a little bit back to the root of it with this current seller's market that we have. Some people are really interested in understanding how some of the systems operate. Slowly over time, we've gotten away from just significant deficiencies, and we talk to people about general maintenance. And the biggest reason for that is simple things can turn into big things pretty quickly with homes. A simple example is gutters that aren't maintained or cleaned, overflowing throughout a season like we're having now with frozen ground and rain. And all of a sudden we have water in the basement, which we know is a much bigger concern for most people that was rooted in a simple maintenance task. And then, of course, planning for future upgrades. I'll touch on a little bit of the verbiage from our licensing. We are required to inform our clients of components of the home that are either significantly deficient or are at or near the end of their service life. So planning for future upgrades, an older furnace, water heater, etc., is important for people. Setting expectations is one very important takeaway for you. In other words, we as inspectors will try to explain to people when we meet them, we're going to find things, we call it our driveway speech, things that range from maintenance type inspections that are easily resolved. Hopefully we don't run into significant deficiencies, but we'll certainly talk about those and ways to address those things. Houses can be in a variety of conditions. People want them for different reasons, right? One may be location, schools in the area. Maybe they wanted a house that they could put some sweat equity into. So it doesn't mean that these houses are not perfect for that person who has entered into a contract. Of course, I'm having clicking issues again. But managing these expectations before the inspection process allows for a smoother transaction. Our staff will try to assist with that, but it is helpful for you to also have conversations with both buyers and sellers to explain to them what's going to occur on inspection day. By definition, our scope of work comes from our Connecticut state licensing. We are licensed by the Department of Consumer Protection, not unlike yourselves. And also the American Society of Home Inspectors. That's where most of the states took their standards of practice from. In all definitions, it is explained as a visual examination of readily accessible areas. In other words, we're not disassembling things to get into what might be hidden by finished materials, as an example. We do describe conditions of components at the time of inspection, and essentially the whole house, top to bottom, roof to foundation, as it's often said. We're regulated by the Department of Consumer Protection. In order to get a home inspection license, it's much more than a contractor's license that they just register for. We have to take an initial course, very similar to your real estate course, 40 hours minimum. And then from there, you can apply for an intern permit. That internship includes doing 100 inspections under a supervisor. And then once those are signed off and completed, you can apply for taking your home inspection exam and getting your Connecticut license. Back in the early 2000s, when we were licensed, there was a little bit of uproar in the industry about it. However, it turned out to be really good. These standards gave us a kind of a level playing field or an expectation of what we had to do versus historically when we had a local builder or a friend that was a contractor coming by, you might have received some handwritten notes on a piece of paper. And then the other extreme was engineers who were spending hours in the house and taking some 2 weeks and such to type a long narrative report that most people couldn't understand anyway. These standards have to be provided to our clients before inspection. So our company provides those by email along with our contract, so people have the time to review them and understand. We have a code of ethics very similar to yours, which our clients can understand what we have to do. So there's the other bullet, identifying significantly deficient components. That's really the key. Helping clients understand other things in the property are somewhat secondary to that as well. I'll touch on some of the components that we look at. If you have questions on any of these, we can get into more detail, but I don't want to bore you with the absolute details here. Of course, we have to look at the foundation, a major structural component, exterior components, basement and slab crawl areas of foundation, framing wherever we can get to it and look at it. Usually that's attics, basements, crawl spaces. We are required to probe a representative number of those framing areas in order to see if there's rot, insect damage, etc. The description of what we can get to and what we can't falls most importantly under places that we can't get to. In other words, let's say there's an underfloor crawl space in a house that gets very shallow or we can't get to it, or it's a locked cavity. You really need to be sure to inform the clients that, hey, there's a portion of the house I couldn't get to. Someone needs to make arrangements to gain access to it, clean up the insulation, create a door, open the door, whatever it is. Otherwise understand that that was not evaluated. Exterior components predominantly include those for weatherization, right? The true chore of a house is protecting us from the elements. So a lot of these things like siding, roofing, and things are intended for keeping us warm and dry and preventing damage to the house. Additionally, grading vegetation around buildings, retaining walls, and things like that, walkways, driveways, all part of our inspections. And then, of course, skylights and the like as well. With plumbing systems, here's an easy one to help your sellers. Let them know that on inspection day, it's best that they're not home. This can be quite an invasive process. With current times, more people are working from home. So we've seen more sellers that need to be home when the buyers are coming for their inspection. It can be a bit overwhelming to have people in your home for over 2 hours, to have people running all the plumbing fixtures, turning the dishwasher on, filling a tub with hot water, running your heat, running your cooling. So if they are going to be home, explain to them that all of these things should be done, and that need to understand. We do look at water heaters, and I mentioned filling the tub. That's how we check the water heater at Tiger to make sure we have good capacity and performance there. The other things that fall into plumbing are fuel storage, distribution, sump pumps. The capitalization on the word describe is an important takeaway for you as well. The state of Connecticut licensing only requires us to describe well equipment that's on site, not to actually inspect its performance. At Tiger, we do go above that standard, but it's one point of clarification for your clients. We will check and inspect the well equipment as part of our standard home inspection. And I'll also touch on briefly our functional flow test towards the end. And more specifically, our functional flow test will be reviewed at the well presentation in 2 weeks. Electrical, people think of the interior fixtures that we use every day. Yes, those are important. We are required to check at least a representative sampling of those. The state understands that there may be furniture and the like that block getting to some outlets and fixtures. What we're really looking for is a bigger picture. Are there a couple outlets here and there that may be miswired? As long as it's not a safety issue, that's not a big deficiency. But as you start to get into 6, 8, 10 plus outlets throughout, you start to acknowledge that there's a bigger concern potentially with wiring or outlet installation going on. So that's why you'll see us going through and checking each and every one of these outlets that we can get to. Smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, of course, is part of your real estate affidavit handled by the attorneys at the time of closing. And then additionally, the exterior service entry is an important one. How does the power get to the building? Is that in good, safe working order is important. That can be expensive with repairs or replacement. We do remove panel covers, both main panels and sub panels, to inspect the wiring within those as well. Heating and cooling systems. One important takeaway here is the adequacy, distribution, and balance are not required to be inspected by the state. If we see something that seems out of whack, generally we would make a comment for further evaluation, a term that you'll see in reports. In other words, if a heating company needs to come and do the actual calculations to determine is this equipment sized right, we're not going to come in and determine number of windows, insulation values in the house, the volume of air in the house, and compare that to the expected size of a heating or air conditioning equipment. So the state recognizes that in our standards. Of course, we do run all of that heating and cooling equipment, attempt to get its age, and of course, describe conditions to our clients. In the accessible areas of unfinished space, we can look at insulation, vapor control, ventilation throughout the house. Energy efficiency is obviously important. An energy audit is a step beyond the home inspection. We are describing the conditions that are evident in there at the time of inspection. Throughout the interiors, most importantly, what we're looking for in here is water entry problems, structural concerns that may show through cracking and settlement in houses. Therefore, we're going through running bathroom fixtures and such, looking for leaks, but not cosmetic type things. Appliances are not required by the state of Connecticut to be inspected. You'll see some variation in the market on that. We have chosen to go beyond that standard and operate installed appliances. So for instance, in the kitchen, dishwasher, cooking equipment, installed microwaves, ventilation equipment, in the like. So you will see some variation on the market there. Fireplaces are important for safety purposes. Gas appliances, solid fuel stoves, all of those are inspected. We're obviously not going to light a fire and check draft and such. Very important on the listing side of things. Most gas appliances are up and running in the wintertime, but seasonally, we get into houses where we don't have remotes or pilots lit for gas fireplaces. You just never know what's really important to buyers. So the more prepared the house is for the inspection, the better the buyer will see it on the day of inspection. In the introduction, Kara mentioned wood destroying insects. The termite inspection, as it's less formally known, or wood destroying insect inspection, is not required by our state licensing. You're going to see some variation in the market here. At Tiger, we have chosen to get all of our inspectors licensed to perform this inspection, and we provide a separate report with every home inspection report specifically for the wood destroying insect. This can become very important for anyone who's using a government loan, any kind of bank that requests the wood destroying insect form, or if there's any requests for treatment based on what's found at inspection, it should be on that national pest control form. So as we go through the properties, we explain to our clients, if they're present, which is beneficial and actually preferred by us. We can go through with them what we're seeing. We can go through positives of the property too, things that have been upgraded, things that are in good condition. We also give them direction on what to do. Is this just an older appliance, heating equipment that is working but aged? Okay, you need to monitor it and start to budget for replacement. Other things may not be functioning, and therefore we would direct them to correct, replace, repair, etc. We talked about the maintenance suggestions. The third bullet is something that's often questioned by parties to the real estate transaction. Why are we recommending further evaluation? So it should be understood that that comes directly from our licensing. The example I gave you about sizing of heating equipment is one. It may be that people question, you know, I could tell the roof needs replacement. How much might that cost, Mr. Inspector? We don't give cost values in particular right now. Things are all over the place with pricing changes in the materials market. So that's one where people might want to get further evaluation to understand when I need to replace my roof, how much it might cost. Additionally, things that are damage is evident, but we don't know how extensive it is, they may want to talk to a contractor to figure out what's it going to take to fix or repair a deficiency. Any questions come in on the chat, Kara?
So I don't have any questions at this time, but please do chat in your questions, everybody. We'd be happy to answer them. We have a couple more question breaks as we move through the program. Oh, I just got one.
All right, good.
Is it possible to get a list of the items that Connecticut doesn't mandate an inspector does, and likewise?
Yes, the entire standard of practice lists all of those things. If you want to chat in your email, Kara can get it, and we can send that out to you after the fact.
So actually, the copy of the Connecticut standards will be one of the follow-up items. So we will provide you with a copy of those standards with, out to everybody. You don't have to chat in anything.
Yeah,
and then
that standard will directly follow what I'm speaking from. That's where we created our notes from.
And then it goes on to say, as well as Tiger, and likewise what Tiger provides as their standard service and what would be available at an additional fee.
Yes. Yep. You want to grab that email, Kara, or name?
Yes. So
Okay.
I will definitely do that. But just to understand, Joe is expressing today what's covered by the Connecticut standards, what's required, and then some ways that Tiger does go above and beyond those standards. And later in the program, we are going to talk about, in general, for everybody, what some of the optional environmental tests are to add on to this standard structural and mechanical inspection.
Great.
And I have one more question.
Good.
Does
No more, you
FHA
have one.
loans require a more detailed inspection?
No, one of the confusing things with FHA loans is they require a different appraisal. And in some cases, it used to be called an inspection, but it was done by an appraiser. They've changed their formal name, but in the industry, it may still be called that. So that is completely different. It's done by an appraiser. The only thing that falls into our lap is different lenders that provide FHA loans require things like that functional flow test, certain water tests, and of course the wood destroying insect form on the National Pest Control form. So those things do vary. So if you know your clients are getting a FHA loan and or more importantly, a VA loan, find out from their lender as soon as possible what those specific requirements are. It's not uncommon for us to get last minute panicked calls right before closing that they need a lead water test or a flow test or some such that the lender didn't make them aware of. So great question there.
So the questions on the FHA go on. Do you need an inspection or is it required for an FHA loan?
No, a home inspection is not required by any lender to my knowledge. FHA does require the termite, as I said, and the water tests are a variable based on the lender.
Thank you. And is a sewer scope part of the standard inspection?
No, that would be in the Connecticut standards. It specifically says we stop at piping at the foundation wall. So those are options that could be added on the sewer scope.
Great, thanks, Joe.
Great, and as Kara mentioned, in addition to questions, if you have experiences, stories to tell, certainly chat them in as well. So access is an important one, and in preparing for home inspection day, getting good access for the inspector is important. Remembering that these seem like very simple things, but when they occur, they become problematic. I mentioned the gas appliances, pilot lights, remotes, fuel and heating systems. We see that in seasonal properties and things like that, where they're not consistently using the heat in other seasons. Perimeters of basement and garages. Yes, people do listen to you to declutter their homes. It often ends up in the places that we need to get to. The fourth bullet there is probably the most prominent, getting into attics. We are willing to move things with permission of the sellers. That may not always be feasible, but people have storage and shelving and very nice clothing and such in and around where we need to set up ladders, open up attic scuttles where insulation may fall down. Those areas should be cleared and prepared for entry. Same goes for underhouse crawl spaces I mentioned earlier. Keys to apartments, whether it's a multifamily or a property that has a cottage or an in-law apartment, all those things, just prepare ahead of time to gain access. Obviously, we've had experience with all this as we create those. And here we are on another snowy day, which makes life a little difficult for us as inspectors if it starts to accumulate. I'm looking out the window here as I speak to you. But these items on the exterior obviously would be inaccessible. We have chosen throughout the time frame that our company's been open to address this by offering a free return inspection for exterior items. We would like to keep all those real estate processes going, go do as much of the inspection as we can and offer a free return inspection. There are other components that are inaccessible on a home, and you should acknowledge that if they're present. Air conditioning, we can inspect about 3/4 of the things that we would normally look at it, just short of turning it on to test it. It's one thing we can't do due to exterior temperatures. We can still visually inspect the equipment, check for filters, operate fans, get dates of both the outside condenser and the interior air handler, and give people information. The most important thing that you can provide for air conditioning or irrigation systems or pools is a recent service receipt. So asking for that ahead of time for your buyers, and or providing that if you're working on the listing side for people to have, goes a long way to reduce questions for the buyer. Again, the state of Connecticut has some limitations that they describe. Destructive probing or dismantling. Homes on homes didn't do us any favors in the industry. We certainly can't go in and investigate a leak stain in a kitchen by cutting open the floor and things like that to disrupt people's properties. We don't move the dining room table and roll up the carpet to check the condition of the wood floors. The service is intended to be the conditions as they exist on the day of inspection. There may be safety issues. We do run into risky situations that we will acknowledge and address. In other words, get into dirty crawl spaces onto roofs and such. But if it becomes unsafe, that something gets delineated there and could be inspected after it's repaired. The top bullet on this slide is an important one. It's often asked about code. Is that installation to code? Is this old wiring to code? It's important to understand, and the way we help people when they ask us these questions is to say the code addresses permitted work, and that may be for an alteration to a building, right, an addition or remodeling, or it addresses new construction. It's impossible to apply the building code to a building that's been around since the 1940s, 50s, 60s, or even maybe the 1700s. We certainly will address things that are safety issues or not good building practices or structural concerns, but not with a reference to code. It's also not an insurance policy or a home warranty. Those are often provided by people in your industry, but not through the home inspection process. And then the state also delineates that piping outside the foundation that one of our attendees asked about. General pests, underground things like oil tanks and such are considered beyond scope of a home inspection unless additional services are ordered. So reporting, in most of the market, what you're going to see these days is a computer generated report delivered by email or posted to a website. Again, confirm that you're getting a wood destroying insect report for your clients. I find that to be very important. You may see that some will charge extra for it. You may see that some inspectors will bring exterminators with them. Again, we've chosen not to bring other parties on site, oil companies, exterminators, etc., so that we know we have our staff there. We know what they're saying, what they're doing, and things like that. We will differentiate to help people understand what's a maintenance suggestion, what's not uncommon for this age of house, and what's a significant deficiency or issue that you'll want to be sure to understand before moving forward with the purchase. Further valuation items should be addressed before closing. In other words, those are the things we want people to do something more to check out or evaluate or get prices on. Even if it's not something, again, taking aside that whole negotiation conversation, they should still do that homework to understand what they're purchasing. And you'll see photos included, I would hope, in most of the reports. We use those to represent things that are difficult to understand. We provide more photos for circumstances where clients are not able to attend. Part of our code of ethics is that our reports are to maintain confidential. In other words, we provide them to our clients, and with their permission, we give them to their representing realtors, all of you guys, so that you can conduct business accordingly. We can't give out old reports to people. We can't provide the reports to sellers and things like that unless designated by our buyer. Here's an example of our report. I find it easy to use and follow each section of the house. For instance, the garage section here is broken down to a different portion of the report. On the left is all the components that we look at. In the center is a simple rating system. The two most important are shaded orange. Those are the not functioning properly, needing repairs or replacement in the further evaluation. And on the right is a narrative description as to why things are rated the way that they are. Additionally, our report includes a summary. So any of those that are falling into those orange shaded areas will be pulled out and separated into a summary so that people can quickly look at the key components. Any questions or chat there, Kara?
Yes, I do have some questions I'm feeding through. I just chatted back to you all. I'm going to send, have Joe and I get together and create a document to answer that great question asked about, what's mandated versus what are the extras, and send that to you all because I've had so many requests for it. And so in between there, I do have some questions. Do you give the lenders a copy of the report as well? Great question.
No, as I just met, you probably hadn't gotten to that part yet, but I would not advise that you give the lenders any extra information other than what's required. I've just seen so many people get into snags with that.
Okay, and let's see. Sorry, I have so many requests in here for the document I'm reading through. I think there was another. Did I ask you about the sewer scope? Is the sewer scope part of the standard inspection?
We already addressed that.
Okay. I think those are all. I don't think I have any other questions right now, but I will read through this. And
someone wrote, when is the home inspection done?
Oh, sorry. Yes, that was a great question.
Thank you. So that is related to your contracts. The predominant time to do the home inspections is as after contract as part of a contingency. That's literally giving someone permission from the seller to go ahead and have a home inspection. So, and those windows of time range from 7 days, 10 days, maybe 14, and not so much in this market, but part of the after contract time frame. In parts of the state, it may be done differently with a binder, and before contract time, just based on different contract formats. Additionally, we have more and more people doing home inspections as a seller. So we call it a seller's preparation inspection. It's also known as a pre-listing inspection. So that works very well. And we have a whole nother seminar on that if you're ever curious, or it's on our YouTube channel. In other words, people can prepare the house for sale, find out what a buyer might find out, either make repairs, make disclosure items, or go ahead and just get prices on things. Like I know I need a roof in 3 years. Rather than having someone try to negotiate, I'll get my own prices and present that to the buyers. Listen, the roof works. It's not leaking. but it's getting near the end of its life, and you could expect to spend X dollars after you purchase the house.
Thanks, Joe. And
Yep.
just to clarify with that, usually a buyer will still do their own inspection so they can have that time in the house with their own inspector to walk through. Those seller's inspections are typically for the knowledge of the seller themselves.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Good. So moving on to environmental tests. These are optional items, and this addresses some of those questions for you. Again, this is a three-part training series, so I hope you continue to attend. Bill Rourke, who is our vice president and manages our environmental team, will address radon in a separate seminar, and well water testing. I will touch on these things briefly. So optional environmental tests, most of our clients, I think we're up around 75% or so, do conduct a radon air test for a buyer's inspection. Those that do well water, that have a well will do well water testing as well. And mold assessments are becoming more and more of a concern for people with respiratory issues, allergens, and things like that. The right column are things that are beyond the scope of a home inspection. In other words, or are not done by us. They require separate licenses, and I will touch more on those today than on the radon and water. Quickly, what is radon? Well, the reason we test for it is it's a naturally occurring gas. We can't smell it, taste it, sense it in any way when we're living in a home. The primary concern with it is considered cancer causing, and the US EPA has set an action level of 4.0. Their statement is anything that tests at 4.0 or above should either be remediated or a long-term test should be conducted. These are some of the devices that are used in the field. We use these continuous monitors. The biggest reason for that is they provide us with much better data. What we get from that is an hourly reading so that we can look at that 48-hour period and confirm that we get a good test. Nobody tampered with it. There were no huge swings in radon levels, barometric pressure, or temperatures, and things like that. If you see a mitigation system on a house, it may look like this on the exterior as a retrofit, or it may be on the interior. Could be a retrofit, but more likely to have been installed piping during new construction. On a well water side of things, there is no, there's no national EPA level. Part of this stems from variation throughout the country in where wells are more prevalent and or radon water is more prevalent. So Connecticut set their own level from the Department of Health, and that's 5,000 picocuries. Private wells in Connecticut, when they did some surveys, tested on average about 3,000 picocuries. One important takeaway that you'll hear again in the water seminar is the state of Connecticut recommends dual vial sampling. You may see some service providers doing a less expensive radon water test. It is more likely than not a single vial sample. The concern with that is the state says you should not move to mitigation with a single vial sample. You should conduct a second sample. So at Tiger, we always do a 2 vial sample to start with, so our clients get good information and they can move forward to remediation if they need to. It can get quite expensive, as we'll see quickly here. Again, I'm not going to work too much into the details, but the first option for radon water mitigation at the lower levels is a granular activated carbon system. While we're here on this image, that GAC, or granular activated carbon, is this cylinder all the way to the right. The next one over is a standard water softener, just for your own education if you haven't had one or seen one. And then the tallest of the tanks in the image is a water heater, gas-fired water heater with an exhaust on top. And the last tank all the way to the left, the blue tank, is a well pressure tank, just to give you some idea what you might see in property basements if you haven't already. On the higher levels of radon in the water, we use an aeration method to control that, and that the black box there is a bubble up system, aerates the water, and then it's again piped outside the house like we saw for the air mitigation. These get very expensive, as you can see. So again, reminder, be sure not to move towards mitigation until you've had a dual sample done. Probably the most common test that we see people do is a basic potability test that includes bacteria and physical chemical traits. Bacteria can be addressed in a variety of ways. Most of these physical chemical traits are handled through pretty standard filtration equipment. Getting into further tests, again, I won't get into the details of these, but they get more expensive, they get more involved. Some of them are site related, like the pesticides or VOCs would be done in areas where those are suspect. Pesticides for farm, orchards, vineyards, etc. VOCs, any place there was an oil tank, gas station, potentially railroad tracks, things like that. And arsenic and uranium has been in the media in the last couple of years. Our water seminar gets into greater detail on those and where that concern came from in the state of Connecticut. The Department of Health is advising that arsenic and uranium be tested for real estate transactions. That comes right from the state, so that's an important takeaway for you there. Earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that the standard of practice described that the state that you only have to describe the well equipment. In advance of our standard inspection, we also offer a functional flow test where we run the well for an hour. We do inspect the equipment. We provide gallons per minute and pressure readings in order to have people understand that they have sufficient water for normal household usage. Moving into mold, more and more commonly, our clients are requesting mold. I'm always very straightforward with this. I never wanted to be in the mold inspection or testing business. I always felt that it was maybe beyond home inspection. For years, up until about 10 years ago, we had consistent client requests, and we were referring a lot of this work to mold companies. Those had kind of a second interest. In other words, they were remediators as well as doing testing. So we did decide to provide a proper mold assessment. Other things in the market we were seeing is that people were just doing air samples and sending lab results to clients, and those numbers can be a little bit scary. So mold, first of all, needs a moisture source, and leaking roofs, plumbing issues, high humidity in a home, these are all very common sources for that moisture. They then combine with organic things in the house that could be sheetrock, other forms of wallboard finishes, flooring, like carpeting, and of course, wood framing. Once we have some mold growth, those spores are released in the air, and those are what affect us when we're breathing the spores. It is known that they affect people differently. So one of the common questions with mold testing is, why isn't there a national standard? Why isn't there a level for each of these different types of mold? And the reason for that is it impacts people differently. I have been in a lot of dirty construction sites, crawl spaces, attics, homes, etc. And I have very little effects of mold. It's getting a little bit worse as I get older with exposure. But other people immediately, when they walk into a house that doesn't even appear to be an issue, are impacted by it. So that's the reason why we do air testing as part of the mold assessment, to determine the spore counts for what is in the air and what are the conditions that may be causing that as well. So should I or shouldn't I is a common question. Some people are very intent on doing this testing because of sensitivity to mold. Maybe they're an increased risk group because of other medical concerns, respiratory issues, heart issues, etc. Others just simply have concerns with the home. Maybe they sensed something when they visited the property. Maybe there's a wet basement. Maybe there's a history of repairs from water damage. So those are some of the reasons why others will test there for mold. Our mold assessment that we came up with through requests of clients for years includes a thorough analysis of the home for active or potential water intrusion areas. Then we look for elevated areas of humidity and other water-related concerns. We do that through visual inspection, focusing more on those water-related and mold-related items than we would in a standard home inspection. Additionally, we use different equipment. We have infrared cameras to check for temperature anomalies that may be related to moisture. And if we see something suspect, we then follow up with a moisture meter to determine if there's high moisture concerns related to mold. Next, we move on to sampling. We do take air samples. If there's something visible, we can take surface samples. And that's always interesting to see that process. Taking an air sample and a surface sample is always educational to know, okay, what I'm finding in the air, excuse me, is the same type of mold that I'm taking from the surface sample. So I've effectively confirmed what the source is, and now I can work with a remediator to clean things up accurately. Those samples, both surface samples and air samples, go off to a national laboratory. We then take that lab analysis and put it into a report along with the pictures, the infrared results, and our visual inspection comments, and put that into perspective for clients of what they need to do. Is this what's considered a homeowner cleanup? I say homeowner cleanup because that is a term that the EPA has created, and they give direction on how that can be conducted. Or is this a professional remediation situation that someone needs to be concerned with? And when I speak towards those lab results, understand why I say that. I had personal experience with it in my home, and actually a rental property that we used to have. And my wife saw the results. There were, 25,000 spore count of something in a laundry room. And that was the same place where the dryer was located, obviously. But those spore counts were, because of the type of mold, looked really scary, but were super easy to address with some surface cleaning and repairing the dryer vent. So putting those things in perspective is very important for clients. This is an example of what we're seeing in a lot of attics. You'll, I'm sure, see this come back on a home inspection report as a apparent visible mold or suspect mold situation related to high humidity in a home and condensation on roof structure. Other specialized licensing needed for tests, asbestos is one. Lead paint is very well covered in your lead paint disclosure. I very rarely see clients doing any lead paint testing anymore. And our direction to them is simply to acknowledge by age of house that they need to address it appropriately. Septic systems, if they're on site, should certainly be inspected by a licensed septic company. That usually includes pumping. And then underground oil tanks is an important one as well. Why do we use asbestos? Asbestos, it was actually a great material for insulating, heat control, and things like that. It's also found as a binding agent in ceiling tiles and floor tiles. 1978, just like your lead paint age, is a good gauge for when they stopped installing it. And the image that you see is a very common heat pipe insulation, both the pipe, main pipe, and the asbestos material on the corner. It's important to understand whether it's friable or non-friable, and that's an indication as to whether it's emitting fibers into the air. Most people are going to want it removed these days, friable or not, but the immediacy of that can be gauged by that. Vermiculite insulation is something that may be identified in properties you're working with. This was an insulation installed from the 20s, even up as far as into the 90s, usually a retrofit situation. The concern is zonalite insulation. Vermiculite was mined from a mine that also had asbestos in it. So therefore, any vermiculite insulation, according to the EPA, should be assumed to contain asbestos. The EPA goes on to say that if it's to be disturbed at all, that it should be abated in the home. So both the EPA website is fantastic with description for this to help you and or your clients if this is identified. And also the Zonalite website that you see on the screen is helpful for information, but also there was a fund there to help with abatement, removal of it. And I don't know if there's still monies available there. It kind of comes and goes on that. Lead paint, essentially used as a pigment and a drying agent for paint. Again, not unlike asbestos, it was very good paint, long lasting, heavier in the 40s and the 60s. When I first started doing home inspections, I did a lot of lead paint testing as it was more common then as part of our optional environmental services. 1978 is when they lowered the max content to a very trace amount, so effectively removing lead from paint. That's why, again, that age is what's delineated in your lead paint disclosures. If one did want to test, you may see a device like you see in the image. That's an XRF analyzer, X-ray fluorescence. Effectively, you hold it up to the paint and it measures the lead content even through layers of paint and such. So it's pretty involved if someone wanted to go through a whole property. In Connecticut, we don't see that done often. In other states like Massachusetts, it's mandatory for multifamilies and such. Septic systems, I like this image when it'll give you a little definition of what's going on when you see someone doing a septic inspection. So they're going to be looking around in the yard for this tank, probing, digging, etc. They're trying to get to these little covers to open up the tank and inspect it. Inside the tank, they'll see conditions with the baffles. They will check the line to the house and the leaching systems as well. So that's what goes on with a septic inspection. Underground oil tanks are a concern and maybe an optional test that someone would do. If we see evidence of a tank like pipes or something that remain, we would recommend either getting documents that it was properly removed or going ahead with a tank inspection. Most attorneys are going to recommend it be addressed before any closing. However, there are no mandates, local regulations to remove a residential size tank. Any questions, Kara?
I have a lot of great questions. We're going to do like a lightning round so we can get to the last section of our presentation. The first one is a great question. How long is a home inspection good for?
Well, I guess that I don't think there is a good for time frame. You know, the conditions that we're describing are what's going on that day, and it would depend how somebody took care of those things that were recommended or maintained. So interestingly enough, when we go back to a property, you know, some years later, whether it's because someone's selling or the other people didn't buy it, most conditions haven't changed much, even though we found a few things from maintenance to bigger concerns. So I guess good for is only as good as if someone addressed the things and took care of what was done. Otherwise, it could keep getting worse.
Right. So I think that's an important point. Thank you.
Yeah.
If radon is found in the air, would it be common to be in the water also?
No, there's no direct correlation because we're dealing with the difference between the drilled well down inside the earth and what it may be exposed to versus what soil gas with radon in it can get up into the house.
Is it common for radon levels to increase due to the installation of geothermal system, due to the additional well installation affecting the bedrock?
No, well boring for a geo well, we pretty much drill right through. We're not pounding and breaking things up and allowing fissures to get into the house. So no, unrelated. Good question though.
Yeah, is the functional flow test standard?
I know that's an optional test that we provide in addition to home inspection because all houses don't have wells.
How can the average person tell if their drinking water is contaminated? And is this something your water company should investigate? So I guess that's a great question about well water versus city water.
When you say water company, the city water is going to be, municipal water is going to be monitored by that company. And then I don't understand the question. How can you tell if your water is it municipal water?
Well, I think there's both here. So I think Jenny is asking, how can the average person tell if the drinking water is contaminated? If it's well water, you're going to need to have it tested. If
Right.
it's municipal water, they should be able to provide test results for you because they are monitoring the water on a regular basis. So you can contact your water company if it's municipal.
Absolutely. And Jenny, we provide water tests for a lot of homeowners that are not involved in a real estate transaction. So we can certainly help anybody with that.
Thank you. What is the best way to clean mold out? And if there's not a lot of it?
The first step is to go to the EPA website and follow their directions. And I say that because the biggest concern we see is that people don't contain the area that they're working on. And you can literally try cleaning mold off a wall per se and spread it to other areas of the house where you didn't have an issue before. Secondly, don't use bleach. Bleach is predominantly water and it will take some surface mold off, but not remove the mold itself. So get a mold or mildew that's specifically a cleaning agent for removing mold. Those are readily available, big box stores, hardware stores, et cetera. But read the label and find something that is for mold cleaning.
So the next question is about our mold assessment, and that is an optional environmental test. So everything we're talking about beyond the structural mechanical, when we switch to the environmental testing section, those are all optional tests at Tiger.
Yep.
How often should you change your septic tank?
Only if there's an issue with it, deterioration, damage, etc. There's a lot of old tanks that are not built exactly the same as the new ones, but they're still functioning properly. So cleaning the tank is done in houses that may have issues or beginnings of issues on the 2-year cycles, and it can be as long as a 4-year cycle if you don't have a lot of people living in the house. That's just the regular cleaning.
Can you provide recommendations for septic tank inspectors and pumpers?
Yes. On our website is a contractor network, and you put in the county that you're working in, and there'll be a list of service providers there. If you need something specific, either Kara or myself can always help you with a direct referral.
Is the green insulation that looks like pink fiberglass paper-backed insulation?
Is it paper-backed insulation?
Yeah.
I don't really follow the question. There is a fiberglass with paper facing on it that is green, if that's what they're referring to.
Okay. Maybe Anthony, if you want to rewrite that and give us more information. And then Laura's asking if you can just explain again the single vial versus the double vial radon in water test.
Sure. The radon water testing is done with a little glass vial, and it's very specific. You have to fill it up without any air bubbles in it so that you're just testing the water. In good science practice, you always take two samples of things. Additionally, there are variations with radon water levels as you're running water. So the State Department of Health says you can't just use one vial because it's not a sample of the water and there's no control. You might see a spiked section there, but it's not a true representation of the water. So effectively, what they would really like is two samples that are done, days, weeks, months apart, but that doesn't fit a real estate transaction. So even if they're done at the same time of testing, you now get two samples that can be compared. The laboratory will determine, is there a relative difference? Is it okay to average them together and things like that when they provide the results?
Okay, we have 2 more questions. Anthony's clarifying. He's asking if the green insulation What is it, and is there asbestos in it?
I'm not quite sure what he's referring to, but no. The only insulation with asbestos content is the vermiculite that we went through. It is not normally green, and he may be referring to urea formaldehyde. If it's a foamy looking insulation, then that does not contain asbestos.
All right, last question from Claire. Is it the law that GFI CIs should be installed within 3 feet of water supply and location? So maybe talk about code.
It is not the law. In a permitted project, you would need to upgrade GFIs to current standard. 3 feet is not current standard. It was 6 feet, but now they're up to just rooms with potential moisture contact. So bathrooms, kitchens, garages, basements, exterior outlets in current safety standards should have GFI. It is not a law.
And how would you handle that in home inspection? It's a suggested
So in
upgrade.
a house that is of the age that it wasn't supposed to have GFIs originally, we simply put it into our report as a consideration for upgrade. And if it's a house that has a GFI installation that's not working anymore, then that one is a deficiency that should be fixed because it was intended to be there.
Great, thanks, Joe. If you guys can all hang out for 5 more minutes, we're going to get through the last section to our raffle.
Yeah, long questions. So how much does a home inspection cost? We talked a little bit, there's people ask questions about some of this. Average fees for that home inspection in the 500 to 700 range. This is going to essentially be driven by the size of the house, extra outbuildings, barns, pool houses, and things like that. In-law apartments may add to fees. Remember that wood destroying insect is a very important clarification. Some people get home inspection prices and don't realize that they don't get the wood destroying insect, and then they have another $75 or even as high as $150 added on. We provide that with our home inspection as part of the initial pricing. So it's essentially free with our home inspection. Radon testing, you'll see different types of devices, therefore different prices, could be anywhere in 100, 200 range. There's your radon water. Again, remember, if it's a dual vial sample, you may see lower prices for a single vial, but you're not completed at that point. Septic ranges a lot because people are starting to use cameras and do some more advanced testing. So low side for visual and pumping 350, high side 800. The mold assessment, separate from the home inspection, it starts at $400, and we say can go up because the more samples you add, the more lab costs you have, and the prices will increase from there. One great takeaway for you, I mentioned a few times some tips on this, but preparing for inspection day, explain to your clients to try to attend without distractions, be comfortable on site. They want to be there to see what we're finding, to discuss things. It helps us to put things in perspective for them rather than just seeing a picture of it or reading the written description, and have planned questions ahead of time as well is always helpful. When choosing a home inspection company, it's very important to understand if they're fully licensed. I went through with you how our licensing process works. When individuals are interns, they can actually conduct home inspections. They can actually own and operate their own business, and they don't have to ever conclude their licensing. So I find in the market, there are some that charge less and never quite get around to taking that final test and getting their license completed. So it's important to be sure that they're fully licensed. Also, insurance is not required in the state of Connecticut for home inspectors. This is very important for people to understand. We carry errors and omissions to protect our clients as well as their referring realtors. Liability insurance in case something goes wrong on site, a ladder damages something, and workers' compensation insurance to protect all of our employees while they're out there working. We've always found customer service to be key, whether that's training our environmental team or our home inspectors on site. But also we have long office hours to help you and your clients schedule appointments, get information, leave messages for inspection staff, etc. They're there from 8 to 8 every weekday, 8 to 6 on Saturdays, and 6 hours on Sundays as well. Reminder again that we provide that wood destroying insect inspection. We do exceed the standards of practice in many ways for state of Connecticut, and Kara and I will distribute to you further information on that. This is our 30th year in business, so we have a great reputation, many credentials with different inspectors throughout our staff. And the more we do these presentations, the more we learn with the questions and input from realtors on how to help you do your business and how we can modify our business. We'll also provide you this great document for inspection day preparation and the standards of practice, and a second document for let's schedule an inspection. These are all helpful for your daily practice. I mentioned this year is our 30th year. We do have a promotion going on. That's our Tiger 30. So it's $30 off a home inspection and $30 off radon testing. Additionally, we have introduced a QR code this year. If you want to test it right now on the screen, it will take you directly to our promotions page on the website. The QR code will be present on the brochures that are in your offices, so people can very simply get to our promotions, which will change on a quarterly basis, so that people have the advantage to get discounts and promotions and such for different services. In closing, anybody have any other questions?
I don't have any other questions in the chat. Just briefly about our pamphlets or brochures. Jenny, you can find those in your office. You can take down my email address and I'd be happy to send you some as well if you maybe are not, if there aren't any in your office or we need to restock. You won't see the QR code yet, but we're just starting to get that out there. So look for that. And as Joe said, visit our website anytime. I am going to share the recording with you at the end of the 3 sessions, so you will receive that as well. We hope you will all come and join us again next week for our radon discussion. And our raffle winner today is Tenley Phillips. I believe she's from Berkshire Hathaway, so congratulations.
Fantastic. And one final mention here is Facebook, Instagram, all of these presentations we record and put on YouTube as well. So please follow us on these social media sites. All of our contact information is on the screen. Historically and still in present, we've continued to develop business relationships by offering to you, send us a picture of something you see on site if you have a question. If you read a narrative in a home inspection report that we didn't do and you have a question on it, send a message over to Kara or myself. We're happy to help you along with your business practices.
Appreciate all your compliments in the chat, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks. Sorry, I ran a little bit long, folks.